It's our favorite time of the week again. Time for hashtag Rise and Q's when we get to answer your questions. Saagar, what is up first?
Number one, what do we got? Based on the recent census data, why do you think people migrated into Texas, Florida, and North Carolina? What do you think, Krystal?
It's sunny and there's jobs.
Yeah, it's actually pretty simple.
And housing prices are reasonable.
Housing, I think, is the number one answer. People make a lot around the tax regime. I actually don't think it has to do as much with the tax regime as with housing price. Where if a housing price is, what, you can live like a king for what, like $200,000 or $300,000 in North Carolina, or even $150,000 can buy you like a relative single family home. That literally can't buy you a condo in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Like a studio 300 square foot apartment in San Francisco. It's just not going to happen. New York, even here in DC. I think it's all about housing.
I think it's a lot about housing too, and especially with pandemic changing work culture habits, that enables you to move to different places where you would rather be. I would buy the tax thing with Florida only because there are a lot of rich New Yorkers who will technically move to Florida for tax purposes. Right. Although that's always been going on for a long time.
That's my thing.
So I'm not sure that that's really different now in any particular way.
I think the internet has flattened America.
That's
really what I think.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And Derek Thompson made the point of, like, we've had this technology it's the culture that changed around, now it's acceptable to have your meeting over Zoom, and no one's going to look down at you or think that you're doing less of a good job if you ask for that option.
Exactly.
All right, second question. Since Saagar already told us what some of his favorite books are, what are Krystal's favorite books, and which ones would you recommend everyone to read? Okay, so I made a short list of 3 that sort of cover the bases. Capital in the 21st Century, Thomas Piketty, for economics, to understand how inequality begets more inequality and the sort of fundamental dynamics that lead to increasing spiraling inequality, and also some ideas of what to do about it. I mean, him and Gabriel Zuckman really were groundbreakers in terms of crunching the data, not just in the US, but around the world on that. Second one, Devil's Chessboard, if you want to understand the nefarious history of Allen Dulles and the CIA. Highly eye-opening, not to mention what exactly happened to JFK raises some big questions there. Read that one. And then one that we talk about here all the time, Hate Inc.
Yep.
In terms of the modern iteration of what's going on in the media, I really think Matt Taibbi wrote the seminal book on understanding the dynamics at play there. So those are my answers.
I think that's right. All right, final question here. What do we got? In the New York City mayoral race, union members are pro-Yang in apparent opposition to union endorsements of other candidates. Why do you think there's such a divide here when candidates leading endorsements are floundering in every poll to Yang? It's a great question.
People just don't care. I mean, there are very few institutional endorsements that matter anymore.
Right.
That's the fact of the matter. I mean, you saw this with Trump and unions as well. All of the unions endorsed Hillary Clinton, and then they all endorsed Joe Biden. But still, a lot of the union membership went their own way. So I just don't think that these institutional brands and sort of signifiers are as important as they used to be.
No, it's fascinating. I was reading an article this morning where the New York Times asked people of rival New York City campaigns, and they all said, who do you think is going to be mayor? And they all said Eric Adams. And Nate Silver commented on this, where he's like, it's kind of like back in 2016 when everyone was like, Ted Cruz is the real threat, even though Trump was like 15 points ahead of all of them, and they just couldn't fathom that Trump was going to win. And I think we all know how that worked out. And I think that that's probably what's going to happen here. There's just like a deep disconnect between New York City establishment, which just cannot fathom that Andrew Yang might win. Now, look, I have no idea. There's still a lot of undecided people and all that. Maybe the establishment wins out, ranked choice voting, a whole lot of shit could go crazy. But anecdotally and through the polling, it looks pretty good for him. Maybe it's wrong. I think there's a lot of similar dynamics to Trump in the 2016 primary in the same way in what's happening here. Yeah,
I think people just have a generally positive view of him.
People just like Andrew Yang.
He's got high name recognition, and that's basically as far as it goes. He benefits even from ranked choice voting. There's a question like, maybe that's not going to, but when they add in ranked choice voting, he continues to benefit. Also, people make the case, okay, well, de Blasio, last time around, Christine Quinn was up, and then de Blasio closes and ends up winning in the last, once people actually turned in. But, you know, that was kind of a fluke. If you look in general at New York City Democratic mayoral primaries, generally the person who's ahead ends up winning.
Yeah.
There isn't usually this dynamic of some random surge or someone at the end. On the other hand, his support is still, you know, it's like 25%. It's still fairly low. And there are still a lot of undecided voters. So anything could certainly happen there. But in general, his success, even if he doesn't win, how popular he's been and how well his campaign has done, I think is a real rebuke of all of the sort of power centers traditionally in New York City politics.
100%. Absolutely.
All right, guys, thanks for watching. We'll have more for you later today.